Randall grows down.
You can hear him?
I want to make sure you can hear.
Yeah, okay, let's get started. 7:45, okay.
Everyone can please find their seats. If there are seats available. And we have more chairs over there. Welcome, family, friends, Talmidim, members of the Kehillah of Morristown, and alle gute Freunde and alle Bekannte. We're gathered here tonight to commemorate the Yahrtzeit of Rav Shneur Zalman ben Harav Refoil Olav Hasholem Wilschanski. As we'll hear tonight, many different episodes and anecdotes about the Ishiyut, about the personality of Rabbi Wilschanski Olav Hasholem. To begin tonight's event, we would like to call upon Rav Baruch ben Yomitzin, an Eidim, a son-in-law of Rav Wilschanski, a shliach of the Rebbe to Morris Plains here in New Jersey, to please come up and say the Rebbe's Kapitel Tilim. And we'd like to ask everyone to please rise and join with him.
Shir Amal Lecha Nasasi as Einai Hayesh Bi Bashamayim Inei Einei Avodim Aliyat Adineihem Einei Shivcha Aliyat Virta Kain Einenu Aladinoi Eleheinu Ala Shifanenu Fanenu Adinoi Fanenu Kirav Savanu Uz Ravas Savalov Navshenu Alag Hashananim Abuz Ligei Yainim.
It is my schus and privilege to be standing here before you to speak about Rabbi Wilschanski Olav Hasholem. It's difficult to say Olav Hasholem. I had the schus to work with Rabbi Wilschanski, be a close friend of Rabbi Wilschanski for over 25 years. And it's with great humility that I stand before you. For those of us who obviously knew Rabbi Wilschanski, know that we're talking about a giant. Tremendous Talmud Chochem, a tremendous Chassid, a tremendous Mekusher to the Rebbe, a Mechanech, a Rosh Yeshiva for over 45 years, a Rav, a Meira Heroah for all who asked him his shilas, the Rav of congregation, Beis HaKnesses, Beis HaMedrash, Levi Yitzchok, which the Rebbe wrote clearly that in order for the shul to bear the name of his father, of Rebbe Levi Yitzchok, Olav Hasholem, the Rebbe's father, it needs to also be a Beis HaMedrash and not only a Beis HaKnesses, which Rabbi Wilschanski Olav Hasholem made sure time and again that there would be always shiurim, that it should also be a Beis HaMedrash. You can pick any order that you like of the above mentioned attributes that I mentioned about Rabbi Wilschanski. In addition to Rabbi Wilschanski being a Rav here, he was also, I was talked about, mentioned Shabbos at length. He was a Emes Chassidische Rav. He was a Rav who brought the Rebbe's Hiskashus to the Rebbe and the Rebbe's Torah and brought the Rebbe to his Talmidim and to the Kehillah here in Morristown. He was unique in being from the Yirei Heroah. There's a famous story with the Frierdiker Rebbe, where the Frierdiker Rebbe asked one of his chassidim to be a sheikhet. And that chassid said, I'm afraid. I don't want to be a sheikhet. It's too scary. There's too much of an achrayis. So the Frierdiker Rebbe answered, Elovaden, nor vemen soll ich beten? Who should I ask? Someone that's not afraid. Rabbi Wilschanski had a tremendous yiras shomayim, tremendous frumkeit, which is something that's quite hard to find in this generation. I had the chance to watch and to work with him for so many years to see Rabbi Wilschanski's tremendous devotion to his different tasks that he was doing here in the Kehillah, whether it be for the Bochrim and for the Kehillah. I personally know of many cases where he literally gave up things from his own personal life just to be able to be available for the yeshiva and be available for the Kehillah. And a tremendous amount of credit needs to go also to Rebbe Wilschanski, who allowed Rabbi Wilschanski to be available as he was so much. He was extremely scrupulous, and I mentioned that word because I learned it from him. Believe it or not, he spoke with a French accent, but he knew English. He spoke English perfectly, and I was able to learn a thing or two from Rabbi Wilschanski's English. But he was extremely scrupulous in his halacha and in making sure that others also adhere to halacha. I remember his warmth when me and my family, me and my wife, and we had one child at the time, we moved there to Morristown. We were greener, as they call it, to Morristown, and the extension of warmth that Rabbi Wilschanski and Rebbe Wilschanski extended to us, as well as everyone else. This is just my own personal feeling, obviously, as well as everyone else, was tremendous. We were in his house. We had the Purim. We just came from Purim. We were remembering how we had the Purim Suda years and years ago by Rabbi Wilschanski. And there's no question about it that the living need to take to heart that we should remember and recognize these great qualities that we were zoichet to have. I was zoichet to have for 25 years. Morristown was zoichet to have for, I think, 45 years, or almost 45 years, that we should take that to heart, remember it, and continue to emulate what Rabbi Wilschanski did. I can only tell you that there were times in the last few years where Rabbi Wilschanski had to go for some sort of treatment. Aklal, he would text me that he's going to be late because he has to be at the doctor. And after the first few times, he would write it to me, and then he came to yeshiva. And I looked at him, and I was like, Rabbi, please go home. You look weak. Chas v'sholem. He came to yeshiva until he couldn't stand anymore. And when he used to write to me that he's going to be by the doctor, I wrote to him, please don't come. He never listened to me. Not only he never listened to me, he called me once. He said, listen, I can't make it up the stairs to Besmet and share on the third floor. Ploini and Almighty, these Bachrim I'm learning with, please do me a favor, send them down to the shul and ask them to come down because I'm going to learn with them in the shul. At one point, he even called me once by lunch. He says, Chaim, I can't make it up to yeshiva. Could you arrange that the Bachar who's waiting for me to learn with him could come to my house down on Tikva Way to learn with him? Which of course he did. And one of those Bachrim even texted me a few days ago, what's happening for Rabbi Wilschanski's Yahrtzeit in Morristown? That tremendous devotion is something that we can all take to heart and we can all learn from, that no matter how difficult it is, up until we can't anymore, he was there and devoted to his Talmidim and devoted to the members of the Kehillah. In this week's Pasha, it talks about V'hanesiim heviu Avnei Hashoyam. The Nesiim brought the Avnei Hashoyam. And Rashi writes here that the reason why they brought the Avnei Hashoyam and they didn't give before is because they missed the boat, so to speak. They decided that they won't give in the beginning. They'll be the big shots, that when everyone finishes giving, we'll give the last $5,000 and get our name on the board, as it's customary sometimes. And they realized that there was nothing left to give, and that's why by the korbanos of the Mizbeach, the Nesiim gave first. That's Poshet Pshat if you read the Rashi. But of course, the Rebbe gives a tremendously deeper explanation. And the Rebbe's Medayik from Rashi asks a question: why did they give first by the korbanos? That's the question. The question is why they gave last, or why they didn't give at all when it came to the Nitvas HaMishkan. Why they gave first? Because they're the Nesiim. And the Rebbe beautifully explains that the question is why they gave first, because a Nasi doesn't give first. A leader's not supposed to give first. A leader's supposed to make sure that everyone else has the schus, even at his own expense. The fact that they didn't give first to the Nitvas HaMishkan was to their maila, to their credit. They wanted to make sure that every Yid has the ability and the opportunity to be mishtatif in the Nitvas HaMishkan. That's why they didn't give first. But it turned out it was a mistake because they were left out and they didn't have the same ishtatfus. So in the end, they were able to do that first by the korbanos. But what does this teach us? That a leader, a nosi, it's never about himself being first. Ever. It's always about making sure the other people, the people who he's leading, the kehillah and the talmidim and his family, that they're all taken care of first. They have to be made sure to fulfill their proper mitzvahs and schusim and obligations. And only then can the leader make sure that he's also involved. I think, knowing Rabbi Wilschanski for so many years, we can clearly say that Rabbi Wilschanski exemplified and personified this midah, this attribute. He literally made sure that there was always a fabrengen, even at his own expense. Rarely did he share when he had to give something up for someone else. He didn't speak about it. But on certain occasions, he would tell me, I really wanted to do this and I really wanted to do that, but I'm not going to, because if I don't, then this is not going to work out and that's not going to work out. I had tremendous, tremendous respect for that, to see someone who was able to take care of himself, spiritually, of course, as well, and gave that up for someone else. A true leader, what the Nesiim in the times of the Mishkan were trying to accomplish. May we all be zoche that we should remember the things that Rabbi Wilschanski taught us, and we should try to emulate his ways. I would like to call up Rav Yosef Menachem Mendel Herson, who is now the Dean of the Rabbinical College of America and the Shliach of the Rebbe to the state of New Jersey. He just was now Memala Mokim of his father, Rav Moshe Olav Shalom Herson, who worked with Rabbi Wilschanski for basically 45 years, and they were tremendously, tremendously close. And I want to take the opportunity to give Rabbi Herson a bracha, that it should be Matzliach, L'maylo min ha-meshur, and L'maylo miderech ha-teva.
Shkaya Rabbi Shapiro, you laid out those points of Rabbi Wilschanski as we know him. I was probably come 9 years old when the Wilschanskis moved to Morristown. So in my lifetime, the Zal was always Rabbi Wilschanski's Zal. And in the spirit of Achayit Nolibe, taking something forward, as Rabbi Shapiro mentioned, I'll point out two things. When I was in Mesivta before I got into Zal, I used to learn here in the summers. And as I learned, even once I was in Zal, Rabbi Wilschanski in the summer was much more able to Zecharayim in the Lenin, because he wasn't bothered by buses and when the Bachim are going in for Shabbos. He was able to just focus on the learning. And it was a pleasure to talk to him in the summers, during the years too. But in the summers, there weren't that many guys around he could talk. So I remember I walked over to him with a Pnei Yeshua. Must have been in the Shir Gilul Mesivta. And I asked him, I was having a problem with dropping the Pnei Yeshua. So he looks at it, he hears my question, and the way it is, sit down. He says, sit next to me, we're going to learn the Pnei Yeshua together. And I'll always remember that. How he went through, first of all, he had to first correct my understanding of the Gemara and stuff. But how he opened up that Pnei Yeshua, I walked away from his table thinking, such clarity, such loneliness, and it became a standard that I would at least try to aspire to, not just to learn through to be able to answer on a test, to get to the depth, to find the clarity that I walked away with that day. Aside from all the goodness and the chassidus, what I found in Rav Wilschanski as I got older, and I started to deal with him not as a peer, but no longer as a talmid. a nice person. A very, nice human being. And when I used to speak to him, there was such a menschlichkeit there. And I remember my father, Pam, when he could no longer walk up here Rosh Hashanah, and we wanted to set up, he'll be here himself, Rosh Hashanah. And say, if Rabbi and Wilschanski are going to be there. So that's good, because I love just sitting and talking to Zalman Wilschanski. It's just a pleasure to talk to him. Chassidish Yid, a pleasure to talk to him. And he said that all the years. So, Chaval Da'atin, take forward. We all have, I'm sure, something to take forward. I know I do. And we all owe him a lot, and we'll continue to owe him.
Rabbi Herzl, you reminded me that Ishmak to talk to Rabbi Wilschanski. So I had the opportunity, because I sat with him in the Beis Medrash for so many hours. So throughout the years, I had the opportunity just to sit and schmooze at Rabbi Wilschanski. He was a tremendous Baal Shmuel. We don't find, usually, by such a person, such a Talmud Chacham, such a Meireh Hira, was licked and learning the whole time, that is also a tremendous Baal Shmuel. With Chassidish Maises, he was Boki in all the stories of the Frierdiker Rebbe from the Frierdiker Rebbe Sichos. And on every single thing that you mentioned him, he always had another story. There was a tremendous geschmack and joy to talk to Rabbi Wilschanski. Anyone who lived in Tikva sometimes remembers I used to give him a ride many times home from yeshiva after Ma'ariv or after Seder. So if you watched, sometimes we still sat in the car for 10, 15 minutes after we pulled up to the house, because Wilschanski was saying a story, and then I asked him a question, and he continued, and it was never ending. Somebody said, "Okay, Shoik, we'll continue tomorrow." But mamish, really a geschmack and a pleasure. It is my honor to call up a friend of the family, and also to represent the Kehillah of Morristown, a well-known figure here, Mr. Albi Rosenhaus.
I realize that probably next to my dear wife Sharon and some members of my family, I've probably spent more hours over the last how many years with Rabbi Wilschanski. He was a very patient man. Right, Sharon? I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to say, but I want to talk about love. Because I can tell you, there is no person that I know who had more love for each and every member of this community than Rabbi Wilschanski. And all the things that he did for all of us came from that. We all know he lost his mother when he was very young. So love is something that was given to him by his mother and his parents, and by all those who were involved in his upbringing. And he certainly gave that back to us all. Sharon and I were privileged to have a little bit to do with the marriage of Ada and Tzemach. Rest in peace. I remember Rabbi Wilschanski called me into his office at home. And he looked at me, he looked through me, and he said, Albie, tell me about Tzemach Kunin. I thought for a moment, not long, because it didn't take long to realize what I wanted to say about Tzemach. I said, Rabbi Wilschanski, if there is an angel come to earth, it's Tzemach Kunin. For whatever reason, which we can't know, God has chosen to have both of them closer to him at the moment. And hopefully it'll be a very brief moment, because we want them all back with us. Please, Abish, send them back to us. Rabbi Shapiro talked about the amazing stories that Rabbi Wilschanski had. And learning with him very often one-on-one in the mornings of the last few years. I was so moved by those stories. I said, Rabbi Wilschanski, you have so many stories. Please write a book and call it Angels Among Us. My dear friends, we have right now an angel among us. It's Rabbi Shner Zalman Wilschanski. God bless you all.
Thank you, Albie. We all echo your bakoshes from Hashem. Certainly bring back all the neshamas. And at this moment, I would also mention Rabbi Wilschanski's brother from Eretz Yisrael, Rosh Yeshiva and Yeshiva in Tzfas, just recently passed away. And third brother, Chaim Wilschanski, is here. Zainab Kishet, Bono L'chaim is here. We wish them all a nechama. And Mashiach should come. We should be zeichet to be with them right away. I would like to call up, on behalf of the family, this just broke, on behalf of the family, Rabbi Vital Wilschanski, a son of Rabbi Wilschanski, shliach to Kenosha, Wisconsin. So please share with us a few words. We need batteries for this? Anyone know? Start.
You have a loud voice.
Use your Wilschanski voice.
Rabbi Yahrtzeit, Rabbi Herson, Shapiro, Rabban of the Yeshiva, directors of the directors.
Stay
Directors of the shul. Start over, okay. So, Beis Mitzvah B'chvei Dachsanya, Rabbi Herson, Rabbi Shapiro, Rosh Yeshivas, directors of the shul, my mother's gesund, family, friends. So tonight is billed as V'achayit and Alibay. Shlomo Melech writes in Kehelas that we must talk, learn lessons, learn from those who have lived how we should live. On behalf of my siblings, I want to reflect a little bit tonight on some shared experiences, some memories that I must take to heart. So on a Friday night, a bit over a year ago, during the time that my father was in the hospital, we're sitting at a Shabbos table in Kenosha, and we hear this crash, followed by this little voice proclaiming, "I didn't do it." I look up, and there's my 4-year-old. Clearly, he had dropped the glass. So I laughed. And I said, "Bavril, carefully, he wasn't wearing shoes, go to the next room and go play in the other room." Sarah was a woman at the table. And she looks at me and she says, "Rabbi, would that have been your father's response to you as a child growing up? Would he have just let you off the hook with a smile and a laugh?" So it got me thinking. Now, probably when I was 4 years old, maybe he would have smiled and laughed and sent me on my way. But I also know that, no, I'm certainly much less demanding of my children than my father was of I. I thought right back to the Shabbos afternoons on Tikva Way, summer long afternoons, where Yankel and I were given quotas, Mishnayos Bal Peh, and wasn't leaving the house until we finished the regiment. Then coming up to shul, Reiven, to my mind, all my friends were playing in the gym, and I sat there, Seydin Agunin, singing, over-singing, those that were talking perhaps, but singing. I had one strong memory. I used to love playing baseball. My classmates were all great. And one time we found this group of Little League kids. We used to play in some of the parks by the public schools. And there was a group of kids there, and we made up that we'll have a game together. We'll play a game against them. I was so excited to play first base. I was a first baseman here in the Shiva Field. And that was wonderful until my father heard about it and put a kibosh on that. Also passed nicht. And it wasn't easy. I don't want to be different. It was hard. So I turned to Sarah and I said, "No. My father wasn't easy on me. However, I wish I could behave to my children the way my father did to me, but I can't. Because you see, I'm not my father. I married to grow up in a home where the dining room was split in half with svarim to create my father's office. Svarim that he cherished. As a kid, going into a svarim store, these little stores in Borough Park, and these little stores, going into a svarim store with him was literally like a kid going into a candy store. It spent hours, he just loved it. It was an office that growing up, he simply sat and learned for hours. Rabbi Shapiro just mentioned it, but talking about his learning, I do want to bring up and mention his unique chavrusa that he had all the years growing up through yeshiva. Yesterday was the end of Shiva for my dear uncle in Eretz Yisrael, Wilschanski, who was my Rosh Yeshiva as well for 2 years. In Chassidus, talks about a tzaddik b'tovlei. How do you ascertain if a love is a consummate love? How do you know if it's complete? The way you do that is by judging how you relate to the things that your loved one loved. The love of these two brothers that they had for each other was evident in the way you translate it to the next generation. I and all my siblings were recipients of that love from my uncle. And of course, the way they spent their time together at least as Bachram, was learning. Lively, loud, singing. We heard about it during Shiva. He came to 770, created quite a scene, evidently. I was told that Rebbe noticed it and commented on it as well. Growing up, I never woke up before my father. He was out of the house to mikveh and davening in the early minyan. And then he would give a little shir in shul, run home. If it was a Tuesday or a Thursday, he had to prepare for the shir in yeshiva. In between this all, he was manal of the yeshiva, so he had phone calls going and coming. Parents, all the yeshivas calling. He'd always be running, trying to make it back to yeshiva on time, because at that point he was still marking Seder at 11 o'clock, which he always came a little bit late to, but he was supposed to be marking Seder. That's Mashiach. He'd come home from lunch, which was also spent mostly on the phone or learning, and then back to yeshiva again till 7 o'clock. There was a Tuesday night Balabatim shir that I would make phone calls for, so my siblings would. We're dealing with the community, the yeshiva, or learning. Always a sefer. He basically worked 3 jobs, Rosh Hashiva, Manal, a community Rav. It wasn't easy, it was hard, and I watched it. I watched him go about his day till I went to sleep, and I went way past that. When my father accepted the post as Rav of Congregation Levi Yitzchak, or wasn't yet Congregation Levi Yitzchak at that time, there were 2 conditions, which I'm eternally grateful for him for putting on when he took on this position. The first one was that every Shabbos Mevorachim he would spend with the Rebbe, and the second one was that every Simchas Torah he would spend with the Rebbe. On those trips to New York through my childhood, my father's unrelenting strictness with me was on full display again. But again, it's something I'll forever remain grateful to him for. There was no missing Kabbalah Shabbos. There was no missing Shabbos morning davening or fabrengens by the Rebbe, long fabrengens. There were many shtiblach around. There were cousins, friends to play with. But you have none of it. My father had a fantastic seat by fabrengens. He sat in front of the Rebbe, 3rd row to the left of the Rebbe, or to the Rebbe's right, I should say. 3rd person in. That was his seat. Every Shabbos Mevorachim, I sat there on the bench with my feet dangling on his lap for countless, thousands of hours, countless of hours of fabrengen. As a child, that wasn't easy. Thinking about it now, was probably harder for him having me sit there than it was for me having to sit there. But for him, it was a zay und nicht anders. We're also middle of the year of my uncle Moshe Kotlarski. Just thinking about some Hastera, which was the other time we come to New York. Another cherished memory was every Shmini Atzeres in Rivki and Moshe's famous Shabbos table or sukkah. As a family of tremendous gratitude and a debt of gratitude to Moshe, having read the Shidduch between my parents. Then always in my eyes, he always looked at as bigger than life in a sense, kind of an individual. But he related to me in such a warm, personal kind of a way. I spent most of my yeshiva years overseas. I met him in Australia, I met him in Belgium, I met him in Israel. And each time I met him, the smile, the hug, brought such a warmth. And the extra $20 he slipped me didn't hurt either. The Tati, my father, was Meshuggah from. In all areas, specifically when it came to food. He had a Yerah from the Rebbe, actually had a directive from the Rebbe to be careful with machalis, with food. And he was extremely, extremely strict on himself and turn on the house when it came to food. But it was really in all areas, Mikveh, davening b'tzibur, minhagim. He had such a love for mitzvahs and for doing mitzvahs behiddur. The joy of waking up early on a Sukkot morning after a long Sukkot Beis Hashem, to schlep up to yeshiva, to go to the mikveh, to come back to the sukkah, to pull out that esrog that he spent 2 hours picking and spending more money than he can afford to buy. And the joy in his face when he took those esrog and made a bracha, leaves such an impression, and it leaves its mark. Just pure joy of a mitzvah. Talking about sukkahs. Thank you, Albi. You made our lives a little bit easier because we used to scavenge through the Mars dump looking for schach until we were finally able to start having a little an easier go at it. We should have for that. But he also verbrained a lot about frumkeit. Verbrained about it. One of his lines he used to say, "Nicht mit dem bist du a chassid, das makes reden nach heute." Ashkenaz Siddur starts with Baruch Shomer. Lubavitch Siddur starts with Hoyt Baruch Shomer. He said, "Oh, Lubavitch, you can talk a little longer." Nicht mit dem bist du a chassid. Another line of his used to ring often was Shomer nafshi ki chassidani. Used to say David HaMelech was saying, "Guard my nefesh because I'm a chassid. Don't allow my chassidischkeit to be an excuse for breaking halacha. To stay up late of Fabringen and then the next morning wake up late and miss my Krishma is an oxymoron. How's that chassidischkeit? How's that Yiddishkeit? Shomer nafshi ki chassidani. Don't allow my chassidus to be an excuse." That same friction he felt in his own personal life. I saw this clearly, he felt when running yeshiva as well. For him, he was running Tomchei Tmin. This is the Rebbe Rashab's yeshiva. How would you even want to lower a standard? Was aufgefragt, like, who's taking the chrayas for this? Why would you even, like, you don't want to be in Tomchei Tmin? Why would you think and consider doing something different? But yes, it was hard. And sometimes a bit meshuggah. Pesach was definitely meshuggah. He had a medical condition from as a child on. He hurt himself when visiting his mother when he was 14 years old, and it forced him on Keflix for his entire life, basically. But he wouldn't take his medicine on Pesach. Growing up, for years, he was off Keflix for Pesach, which meant at the end of Pesach, there was always a race. See, cellulitis every year after Pesach, that was the Mashiach Suda. He was fetching, making it through town to go to Mashiach Suda, but he ended Pesach with a raise every year. Chumras. What was fascinating though about it, that with this unbending approach, it was a massive heart. It was a heart that went straight from his heart to the tears or smile in his eyes. Both by davening, crying in Kippur by Musaf, Sarah Malchus, you felt it. And other parts. Gedavet. And he unbashfully. On the other hand, when you met him, you could literally see how happy he was to see you. He had certainly an open and unabashed pride in his children. He wasn't embarrassed about it. But for others as well, for general family and friends, My mother was always had this line growing up that from Morristown to Crown Heights, it's an hour trip. I don't know what it is today. But from Crown Heights to Morristown, it's 3 weeks planning. The amount of trips my father made from Morristown to Crown Heights for a l'chaim, for a bar mitzvah, he probably was in more simchas in Crown Heights than I would be if I lived in Crown Heights. Because he cared about people. So he schlepped. The amount of people that came over to us during Shiva and afterwards, Bachrim, they had their personal stories of an extra giving. Bachrim told me he came there from a yeshiva. He found him a job to clean the swarm because he knew he had no money. Came to Hanukkah Guild. There's always like $20 more. I remember there was a family from France. A Bachar got sick. His mother came into our house for over a week. Spent nights in the hospital. What was the foundation of this all? Where did it stem from? Certainly nature, nurture. Growing up, orphaned at the age of 4, 5. Being raised by Zaidi, Renoir, certainly impacted him. But I believe there were 2 underlying drivers. His Avos Hashem, which was intertwined with Avos HaRebbe. Coming to Pesach, how many times did you all hear it? It says that Moshe's name is not mentioned in the Haggadah, but he used to always say, no, it is. Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdei. That it's intertwined. A love, a passionate love for the Eibishter, a passionate love for the Rebbe. And bittul, Yiras Hashem, bittul. If I bring often about the Rebbe starting Tivus Hashem, that children are already soldiers in Hashem's army. If I bring often bar mitzvahs, his go-to speech, I'm guessing till now, was he used to talk about how the Rebbe would give a bracha, it should be a chassid Yerushalayim and Lamdin. And there wasn't always the bracha. Because technically, it should be chassid, Lamdin, Yerushalayim. Learn even if you're not a Yerushalayim. But the Rebbe changed it to chassid Yerushalayim Lamdin. Because chassid Yerushalayim Lamdin spells out a chayil, a soldier. And the Rebbe gamat soldaten. Subserviency. Kabbalah soul. Just do it. Which for him summed up a love for the Rebbe, which made up being a shliach most important thing in his life. I kept him sharing stories of the Rebbe. He would never give a speech like I just gave. In his close to 50 years giving speeches, it was always a sicha, always a fabringen. He had a love for the Rebbe and he shared that, always. But along with that, just a soldier, a chayil. So I turned to Sarah and I told her, my father was certainly harder on me. After Akafis in 770, at 2 o'clock in the morning, where he had to go to his own Akafis afterwards also, he schlepped us home going into the sukkah by Nachman and Friedel on the porch to sit down to a full formal Yom Tov meal with nigunim and to wake till 4 in the morning, to wake up at 9 because you have to go to Shachas, the half empty 770. We're the only kids there, also everyone's asleep. We were there. A soldier. But along with that, while it wasn't easy, there was love. There was passion and love. So I had no resentment. And I never did. Because I saw him demanding of himself way more than he ever demanded of me. And if I don't demand of myself, how can I demand of my children? So on a night like tonight, of Achayit in the Libre, we must remember those lessons of Übergegebenkeit, Frumkeit, Chassidishkeit, and Eskashkas. and try to be a little bit for our children like he was for me. This moment, I'd like to call up an extremely special friend of our family. You know, the Rebbe spoke about having a Reifi Yedid. And when there's a question, a medical question, you should go to a doctor who's a friend. And my father was lucky enough that while suffering and going through his latest trials, he was blessed with a tremendous Reifi Yedid, someone who fits all those markings to the T. Dr. Solomon was always there for him. I'll share that right at the end of his life was a medical question of how to proceed. The last night, a few hours before, and Sandy was there with him, and the doctors thought that he didn't have control or know what's happening, and he motioned he wants to write. It was over after 2 o'clock in the morning, and he wrote down words, Dr. Solomon Reifi Yedid. He asked that Sandy call Dr. Solomon to ask what to do. And it was way past 2 in the morning, and the phone was answered with cries. As a true friend, told us what to do. And those were the last things my father wrote. I'd like to ask Dr. Solomon to please come and share a few words.
First of all, thank you for the honor and the privilege to speak to you tonight. I know we must be close and must be like family because we know the halacha is that when it comes to the family, sometimes you can bend the truth a little bit. So I know the introduction was definitely family. I appreciate that. I was asked to say a few words, and I'm humbled to say a few words in front of you. And the truth is that I was so excited to come here and just learn more about Rabbi Wilschanski, because I knew him and I knew the family, but there's so much more that I just didn't know. So many people that knew him from his times in France, many years here, many of his Talmidim and his Chaverim, and it made me think, he's such a special person. How can I speak and how can I say something in such a short amount of time that could do justice to what I learned? Just to hear from you guys is so powerful. But in the way that I spoke to Rabbi Wilschanski, we have to be mitzamtzim sometimes. And if I had to be mitzamtzim, who I don't think I have many chidushim to say. I don't think I have anything unbelievably new to say to people here, but some things that stood out to me, if I had to be mitzamtzim who Rabbi Wilschanski was, it would be something that comes up throughout the parashios of the last few weeks and the next few weeks. And again, we hear the words, in 2 words, if I had to summarize Rabbi Wilschanski, chacham lev. He was a person of a chacham lev. And to me, chacham lev is something that it's hard to put into words. What is a chacham lev? Maybe it's close to my heart as a heart doctor, but chachma, lev, what exactly is it? But sometimes you kind of just know it when you see it. Some people just have that chachma, and they have that knowledge, but sometimes some people go above that knowledge, and sometimes you just know when you see it. And I remember maybe the second time that I met Rabbi Wilschanski, I saw he was on my schedule for a Friday, and we'll come back to that in a second. And I did a little research Thursday night, and I found a good shiloh from Rashi on the Parsha. It was Friday, and I made sure that it was a good question, and I found a good answer, and I ran it by a couple of friends of mine and people that I trust, just to make sure that it was a good question. And I came prepared. I wasn't a Talmud in Tomchei Tmiyun, but I felt like I can maybe as Chazayim as Karayom, maybe impress him, or maybe he'll come up with a good answer, a second answer. And that's what I expect from a lot of people. And I remember I'd ask him the question, and he didn't give me an answer. Okay. And, his first thing was to explain to me why my question wasn't a good question. And then he'd give me an answer how there's a sikha from the Rabbi, and he would explain to me how the Rabbi does address it somewhere else, but it's really not a good question. So I saw it on my schedule again on a Friday, and a couple weeks later, and I did my research again, this time Wednesday night, and I made sure that it was a really good question on the Rashi, and the same thing happened. I would ask the question, and he didn't give me an answer right away. He would again explain why my question, very, very nicely, why my question wasn't even a question. Then I started to realize that he was somebody special. He was somebody who just had the chachmas lev. Someone who was above what you would expect from somebody who just had the knowledge, who was growing up with all of his experiences. There was something special about that. I want to break down a couple of ha'aras that I have into the concept of chachmas lev, maybe related to Rabbi Wilschanski, and I'm sure that you've experienced this more than me. There's a question that is asked from this week's parsha. It says in this week's parsha, "U'leiv kol chacham leiv nasati chachma." Now, if you break that down, it's a little bit confusing. Hashem gave chachma to somebody who had chachma, and this isn't my question. This is asked by many achronim and many rishonim, and the truth is, it's asked also in the Gemara in Brachos Nun Hey Amud Aleph. And the Gemara in Brachos says that yes, Hashem gave chachma to people that have chachma. And the question that's asked by many is, where did the first chachma come from? Hashem didn't give chachma if you have chachma, but it's circular logic. It will never actually come to an end. And perhaps in the proper Rabbi Wilschanski way, we can answer this question with a question. We know in Pirkei Avos, it says, 4th parak, 1st Mishnah, Ezu Chacham. And if I were to go through all of Shas, and I were to try to delineate the merits that make somebody a Chacham, I would find many sources for an age requirement. I would find sources for how much you have to have learned, how much time you must have put into it. But that's not what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says, Ezehu Chacham, halomei mikol adam. Who is somebody who is a Chacham? Who is somebody who really has a Chachma, whatever Chachma is? Somebody halomei mikol adam. There's a disconnect there. Chachma, how could Chachma be something that's acquired from somebody who just learns from other people? On the surface level, this epitomizes the few years that I've known Rabbi Wilschanski. He was somebody who had a deep understanding of Torah, both halacha and hashkafa, chasidus and others. But no matter what, he was always interested in learning, in listening, in hearing. I want to take it a step further. Rabbeinu Yonah asks this question to some degree, and he says that what does it mean, halomei mikol adam? Shekol kachu oheves hachachma mis'aver aleha, sheshoa lechol adam, ve'af mi she'en yodea, ki im davar echad levad yilmad oso mimenu. There's a she'ifa, there's a drive. This is what somebody was brought here for. That was clear. And it was clear not right away to me. It was clear after a while when I started to figure out that he was only making appointments on Friday. And after I kept asking more Rashis and getting more answers about how they weren't questions, somebody had mentioned to me, he never mentioned it to me, that it had to do with the fact that he was learning yeshiva, and he was going to do everything he can to spend all the time in yeshiva that he can. He would have the ritzifos and the amelos no matter what. Many people point out that chachma and leiv are incongruent. We don't think even in Chazal, chachma doesn't come from the leiv. The leiv is a feeling, it's the hargasha. Chachma is the moach, and to some extent, modern science is no different. We know that the heart is very interesting. I happen to like the heart a lot, but the heart, it's doing the same thing day in and day out. It's it's pumping. It's not thinking. It's just doing its job. It's a good chayil. It's just making sure that you're up on time for davening, and nothing fancy. But this is what Chazal mean when they say that maybe the most important pasuk in the Torah is Es hakeves ha'echad taseh b'boker, Es hakeves ha'sheni taseh ben arbaim. And we used to talk about Hasidus a little bit. We used to talk about I explained to him that I wasn't the biggest Hasid out there, but it was clear to me that what I would think about Es hakeves ha'echad taseh b'boker, Es hakeves ha'sheni taseh ben arbaim, the ritzifos, the hislavos, the love, maybe you would hear in a more litvish yeshiva. You wouldn't expect that from somebody who had the knowledge and the depth and the breadth of Hasidus. The way that he was able to intertwine both of those, to me, was out of this world. Maybe this is also from this week's parsha. After at the beginning in Rishon, Moshe goes up to Har Sinai and he spends 40 days and 40 nights learning with Hashem, and then he comes down. And right beforehand, the pasuk says something interesting. Vayitain Hashem al Moshe, that Hashem gave to Moshe. And there's an interesting Shmos Rabbah, which I heard recently, that says that every day of those 40 days, Moshe learned and forgot for 40 days and 40 nights. Came Hashem on the 40th day and said, Vayitain, I'm going to give it to you. And many ask the obvious question, if Hashem's just going to give it to Moshe, why go through the superfluous activity of learning and forgetting and learning and forgetting? And the answer is obvious, but it really epitomizes Rabbi Wilschanski. Going through the day in and day out, making sure to put in the effort, making sure that no matter what, I'm going to stay in the base medrash and I'm going to put in my effort and I'm going to do whatever I can to learn with an extra person or to help an extra person. It's just kind of a continuous day in and day out. That was very clear in my experience with Rabbi Wilschanski. And I want to share one more thing, if we can, that really struck me and struck many people. In Malachim Aleph, Parak Gimel, we know that Shlomo is offered from Hashem the ability to ask for whatever he wants. It says, Vayomer Elokim Sha'al Ma Etein Lach. Hashem says, tell me what you want. A couple psukim later, the way I learned it, I don't know if it's taught this way in Tom Ketmim, is he asked for Chachma. Shlomo asked for Chachma. But the truth is that the text is a little different. Shlomo says, V'nasata l'avdecha leiv shomea. All he wants is a leiv shomea. He just wants to be able to have a leiv shomea. I'm not going to define it because I don't think I can define it properly. Okay, that's what Shlomo asked for. Comes a couple psukim later, and Hashem says, Hinei asisi kidvarecha, I did exactly as you wanted. Hinei nasati lecha leiv chacham. Hashem says, I gave you what you wanted, I gave you leiv chacham. And the question has to be asked, that wasn't what Shlomo asked. Shlomo said, I want a leiv shomea. I didn't want a leiv chacham. How do we answer this question? I want to offer an answer based on Pirkei Avos, Perek Beis, Mishnah Tes. It says, Tzuru, Ezo hiderach yishar sheyidbak bo ha'adam. What is the way, what is the proper path that a person should be dovik? And Rabbi Elazar says, Leiv Tov. The law just says that the proper midah that a person should have is a leiv tov. And nothing can, for me, describe my experience with Rabbi Wilschanski than somebody who's a leiv tov. And I can't define it for you. And yes, it includes somebody who is humble. Yes, it includes somebody who is careful and scrupulous. Yet it definitely is somebody who is going to listen to others and is going to care about others. It's all encompassing. But I will tell you that, and I don't know if I've shared this with many people, but Rabbi Wilschanski made an impact on a lot of people in this room. I will tell you he made an impact on almost everybody in the hospital who we interacted with. He, at the end, was in the hospital for a long period of time, relatively, and he was on many floors, on the 5th floor, and the 4th floor, in the CCU, and the SICU, and the ICU. And every night he had one nurse, and every morning he had a different nurse, and every day he had sometimes a different doctor, and that was overseeing him, and each of them would call me, whether I asked them to or didn't ask them to. And they would tell me the same thing. They would say, he's a really special person. Not Jewish. I asked the chaplain to stop by the first day, and I said, do me a favor, stop by, see if the family needs any help, see if they can help out at all. And she called me and she said, Rabbi Wilschanski is a very special person. I gave her no introduction. I didn't say anything. I said, yeah, I do. I do. And it took her, who sees many people very quickly throughout the day to help a lot of people, 10 seconds to figure that out. It wasn't just in the hospital. When he would come to the office, he would make an impression on my staff who weren't Jewish. They would come over to me afterwards and say how special a person he was. And when they found out that he was nifter, a couple of them broke down crying. He touched so many people, not necessarily actively, not necessarily by reaching out to them, just by his personality, just by who he was, and by what he stood for, and how he conducted himself. But when I read this Rabbeinu Yonah, to me, it just encompassed everything. It spoke for itself of who Rabbi Wilschanski was, and if you'd indulge me for 2 minutes, I just want to read it. Rabbi Elazar Omer Leiv Tov. What is a Leiv Tov? So Rabbeinu Yonah says, Harav Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam Zechron Levracha, Perish, Shezosi Malas Tipen Amidos. That Leiv Tov is the ultimate type of amido. Bishadei Osav Shal Adam Nivyosam Min Alev. Vizman Shal Libo Tov, Kol Midasav Yisharos V'deos Nefonos, V'nimsa Sameach Bechelko, Mischaber Im HaTovim V'eno Chavetz Ela B'davar Sheyesh Bo to Oslo Hafsed. This itself, by itself, was who Rabbi Wilschanski was. From the Leiv Tov, everything comes from there. That's where the happiness comes. That's where the Yahrtzeit comes from. And that's where Sameach Bechelko comes from. And there's no question that he was Sameach Bechelko. The Emes Ki Hadavar Kain, who could divrei them, and the Rabbeinu Yonah takes it a step further. He says, that is true, that what the Rambam says, it's not the whole story. What is a Leiv Tov? Rotza Lomar. What is it exactly? Midas haratzon. Zeu asavon. That's someone who's patient. She'eno k'tzar ruach. That isn't a k'tzar ruach. U'misrachek midas hakas. He distances himself from the attribute of anger. U'meshiv b'man nerach. When he answers softly. Achki yasu lo davara yisbelehu ve'ein mar b'fiyu. Kichiko mamtakim v'kulo machamadim. I think this Rabbeinu Yonah was written for Rabbi Wilschanski, I have to say. We say that the Shir Shifcha is Yud Beis Chodesh. And it's true, psychologically, and it must be true because Chazal said it. But to me, it's not going to be true. Because it has to be that his Yahrtzeit is during these parshims. Every time I hear Chacham Lev, every time I hear the phrase Chacham Lev, it's just going to be a natural reaction to him. In Shmaso Tzorachayim.
Thank you very much, Dr. Solomon. You're from the people that it's good to get to know, hopefully not in your office. It helps. I would like to call up a childhood friend of Rabbi Wilschanski, someone who grew up with Rabbi Wilschanski back in France, hence the French accent that Rabbi Wilschanski had. I knew that Rabbi Wilschanski came from France because my father and my mother actually were also both born in France in that period. And Rabbi Wilschanski's name was always mentioned, mainly also because he also lived in Miami. I still remember as a very young child, I remember the Wilschanskis in Miami. And afterwards, as Sally mentioned, Rabbi Wilschanski sat on the third bench, my father sat on the fourth bench, and I was on the lap behind Rabbi Wilschanski, probably fighting with Levi and Yankel, whoever was sitting there at the time, I would imagine. Brings back the memories. But I would like to call upon Rabbi Susha Zilberstein, the Shliach from the Rebbe in Montreal, to please come up and share with us a few words.
You'll excuse me that I will not speak about Wilschanski. To me, it's Zalman. Always was, and always will be. And one thing I'm sure, Zalman is telling me that Zusha Hakish. And he's thinking that this whole event, what are you guys wasting? What do you say about a good friend? We've heard all these special qualities of him. Tremendous Talmud Chacham, devoted Shira, about Koila, about Tefillah, about Vegesh, about Yisurim. His commitment, his devotion to each and every one that he came in contact with. And I sent Ruben to Morristown a few months ago. I told Ruben, go to Morristown, I have a good friend up there, he'll take care of you. And from what I understand, he did. We share a few personal, maybe very personal, I don't think I necessarily shared it in the past. I arrived in Brunois, Tavshin Chaf Hei, a culture shock. Let me just put it in this way, excuse my example. But in the home where we lived, we had more bathrooms than the whole yeshiva had. And I was welcomed into the Wilschanski Palace. the only room in the whole building, in the dormitory, at least the upstairs, that they actually had running water. This listener asked special permission, favor, to take in this Bachers coming from Antwerp, Balbatische Stub, etc., etc. Let them at least have running water in the room. The culture shock was not just the language. I remember arriving in New Year's. I did speak Yiddish. I didn't know what they were talking about. No, we komen met de baan, met de trein. Hij kan meer slapen in een kasket. And I didn't know what they were talking about. So it was like I was lost. But more than anything, I was lost to a new world. Such terms that I never heard before. I told him, Chassidus, Iskashus, Rebbe, Iskafia, remember that's Benoit. Kabbalah Sale. That was foreign to me. So the ones who led me make the transition, excuse me, from a Polish Tripke to enter in the Turkish meaning of my two good friends. Zalman and Nietzsche. And his friendship never broke, never ended. I saw Nietzsche 3 weeks ago. Zalman in his sensitivity, his particular Edelkeit, realized, I don't know what's flying. So one day he explained to me, what is the meaning of atomic? I was either too proud or too embarrassed to ask. All these terms, sitting there and listening for blank I had no idea what it's talking. Slowly but surely, step by step. As I said, Zalman and Nietzsche, because they were inseparable. Sad to say, by my son. Together with the teasing, but with his particular sensitivity, in realizing that I possibly need help and I'm too proud or shy to ask, always explain to me. So Baruch Nizaz was a tremendous privilege to be entered into the Wilschanski room. Just a little anecdote. We just Shush Purim. I still had my pants behind my ears like everybody should be Ingele. And although the one who did it was not Zalman and Nietzsche, I think got Itzel Goldberg, the Shishiva Mikula Hemik to do it. But I know they were behind it. And just a Purim afternoon, coming behind me, snipped off my left pair. Okay. I turn around to Itzel and I say, Itzel, excuse me, today's going to go better. Itzel. Sein ich kann es sehr, schneid auf die zweite Recht. Of them that's too hard, Mrs. Nefesh. This you're gonna do yourself. And I knew that Zalman was behind it. He gave me a lesson. You need some Mrs. Nefesh to become a husband. But his friendship went much further. Zalman was one who prepared me the first time when I went to the repetition for Zion. Although the rest of the Putzi came for Tishri for reasons, Belgian army, I couldn't come for Tishri. So I decided to come for Shavuos, for Zion. Zalman made sure to send a letter, I think, to Nachman Shapiro. It's a good appeal, to take care of him. And like this, he prepared me also for my wedding. At that time, there was no official classes, etc., etc. Salman was there with his edelkeit and his sensitivity, Chassidishkeit, his way of speaking, his tznius, his halacha, his edelkeit, his frumkeit. Talking about frumkeit. For a while, I used to send you, Salman, for some odd reason, decided that the milk from Montreal, yes, he felt the cows are holier. The milk from Montreal are more kosher. The apples are chumra though. So for a while I used to send cheese till it all chopshing in the. It wasn't a game. It was fun. It was fun. We know of each's opinions. The whole world knows it. I have some news for you. Zalman had the identical ones. Just about every Moshiach campaign that I over the years was involved. Zalman was my sounding board. I would run it by Zalman. Yankel knows when we opened the Mashiach office, together with Moshe, we call him Moshe Wilschanski. That was after lengthy discussions with Zalman. And Zalman agreed, yeah, Yankel should be the one to run it. Kinus nun Gimel nun Dalet. That time I was, let's say, heavily involved in the Vada Kinus, in Gimel particularly. At that time, we used to still write Hachlotes of Akinus. This has stopped for some odd reason. But at that time, every year, there were Hachlotes of the Kinus. Zalman and I were the ones who wrote it, Zalman mainly. We came to the campaign of Kabbalah Samalchus a few years ago, with Rabbanim, Rosh Yeshivas, and Mashpim from all over the world signing on to it. Again, Zalman wrote the Nusach, or I should say, corrected the Nusach. And I can go on and on and on and on and tell you all kinds of Mashiach campaigns and Pu'ulis. We started the Teres HaGeula website of Erchin in Yonah Mashiach. And I knew that Amber wasn't feeling well. I might have known more even than you children do. And Itche was telling me, Zog nicht Zalman wie ich viel sage, and Zalman was telling me, Zog nicht Itche wie ich viel sage. They were protecting each other, the one should not know from the other. I told Zalman I need a editor-in-chief. I need somebody to be in charge of this website. Of the Erchim. We're going to create an encyclopedia online of subjects of Inyan Mashiach Gedolah in serious learning, not just quotes and maramukayis, but topics written properly, which Baruch Hashem is starting again. Without any hesitation, Zalman took the responsibility. And then I realized I made a mistake. Because I really took it very serious. On every topic, he sat weeks and weeks and weeks. Zalman mit doch keinem Gendigen. If you want me to do it, I can only do it my way. It's got to be perfect. To send it back to the right line. There we saw his geheimnis. In Nigle, Chassidus, the Sichus of Rabbi, in Yad Mashiach, the depth of it, which reminded me when Zalman and Nietzsche were learning Chavrus and we rose together, except for the 2 years that Nietzsche was in Australia. And you mentioned it earlier, the whole 770 flex, I had a shrine, because it's a problem. You really felt like Matan Torah. Nietzsche would be genug stehen. Zalman sagt, man darf grundig. And there I saw how everything has to be clear. When it came out, it was complete. As I said 2 weeks ago, I spent some time with each in the hospital. And Nietzsche tells me, the Meise Zalman hat mich weggelegt. Guten Tag. And I have no doubts, both of them are standing now by the Rebbe, wherever that is. Und Nietzsche schreit Lechi, und Zalman sagt, Rebbe, komm schön.
Thank you very much. Chassidim, someone is lifted, a chassid, we always say, so the betten zum Rebbe, the Zusha was mentioned, no question. I heard from my father that he was standing there when Rabbi Wilschanski's Shver, I think it was Shabbos during Shiva, after Shiva, when Yaakov David Ketlarsky passed away. My father told me he was standing there, the Rebbe told him, sitzt jetzt und hört Chassidus von Shver. That your son right now is sitting on Milo and he's listening to Chassidus from my father-in-law from the Frierdiker Rebbe. There's no question about it that Rabbi Wilschanski is sitting together with other Chassidim and listening to Chassidus from the Rebbe without a question. I just want to add, you said wrote and then edited. So I don't know if anyone mentioned it till you mentioned it, that Wilschanski was a professional writer. Halotzadik, I don't know how you translate that. Anytime I needed to write something proper and professional, for example, we had to invite the chief rabbi from Eretz Yisrael to come here to officiate by the Chag HaSmicha. So I had to write a letter. They told me, so write a letter. How do you write a letter? I know how to write a letter. So I went to Rabbi Wilschanski. So to me, du schreiben. You write it and I'll take care of it, which is what I did. And I wrote something up, of course, and then he took it apart and rewrote it. And when it was retyped, it was a whole different letter. Haroi l'shmoi. It was mentioned also that he cared about making sure that everyone did things right. I still remember one of the first years when I was in yeshivas, he came over to me, he says, I want you to give a shir. It was before Pesach, he was asking each one of the Avolim, like a shir, give a shir clearly on different topics. He asked me to give a shir. I'm like, once I could come, I just came, I come giving a shir the other day. No, you give a shir. I'll sit down with you. He says, come. So I sat down, and he taught me how to give the shir, but I remember he was speaking, don't do this, and don't do it like that, and make sure that this is how you do it. So after the first time he came over to me, he gave me a few pointers and a few tips. After 2-3 years, he says, Beseda, you don't have to come back. You don't have to come back to me. But he cared. He wanted to make sure that everything was done. There's no question that this is the Yahrtzeit, not the first, but the final and only Yahrtzeit that we're going to be celebrating for Rabbi Wilschanski. Because Be'ezer Hashem, by the Shana Haba already, by next year, we're all going to be in Yerushalayim Ben HaKodesh. Zeno Neinu with Rabbi Wilschanski, Sheibona Beis HaMikdash Nidin HaYontiv, B'Shulchal Tziyim Berachamim, and we'll have Tchias HaMesim, and we'll be together with our Rebbe. Amen. We're going to conclude now with Ma'ariv. We need how many minyonim? 6 minyonim? With Rabbi Mendy Herzog, right? We'll have 6 minyonim and Rabbi Wolf, 7 minyonim. 7 minyanim, so we'll split up into different parts, or in the dining room, in the shul, and here in a few places, and we'll make 7 minyanim. And tomorrow is this Achnos Seveteda, correct? In Crown Heights?
Siyum
Seveteda.
398 Crown Street.
398 Crown Street, whoever's around. And we should be zeicher, the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, take it from Miyad Mamish. Good evening. Yeah.